Hello everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Now, as hinted at last week, I'm going to proceed with a bit of a transcontinental themed week. So the next, at least the next two videos are going to be themed around a transcontinental theme, which I hope some of you'll enjoy, and it's something a bit different. So I'm going to kick things off with a review and unboxing of this gorgeous 440 locomotive. Obviously it is a transcontinental, and it's a 440 Union Pacific number 119, as you can see there on the end of the box, and the name there is Jupiter, which you may or may not be able to see at this stage on the tender. Now this is an Airfix model, and once again this was in my box of goodies from Chams 123, very generously of course. This actually was his loco, but he's since replaced that with a Bachmann version, which we're hoping you'll be able to see on his channel sometime in the next 2 weeks. But it's very similar to this, other than that it's Bachmann, and probably it's, you know, a little bit more detailed and very nice. But of course I've now got this one, and I'm going to do a little unboxing and a review and a run. So yes, let's see how we go. So we get her out, and she's in fantastic condition. I've given her a good service, not that she needed it, but yeah, she is running very, very nicely. Now I'll get her out so that you can see her in better detail. So as you can see, she's a very, very pretty little locomotive. She's, well, you can probably tell by the scale of my hands, about the size that she is. She is HO, which is not what I'm used to, obviously, being, you know, mostly a Hornby and occasionally a Bachmann person. But I think this loco is a real nice piece of kit. And well, I'll put her up on the card, on the white card, so I can try and film some close-ups, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about the detail. So yeah, let's do that. So there she is, filling the screen, the 440 number 119 Jupiter locomotive, and a 440, which is, of course, as you may know, one of my favourites. Now this is a very detailed little piece from Airfix, and never let it be said that Airfix models aren't detailed, because some of them aren't, but this one certainly is. So we'll start with the loco. You've got a lot of added bits, as I'm sure it's quite obvious. You've got a nice little bell just behind the huge chimney stack there. You've got a lamp on the front, which is working as far as I'm aware. It hasn't got an LED in it, it is actually a bulb, but it doesn't flicker as far as I can tell. It doesn't flicker too badly anyway, so, you know, unless it's broken, let's not fix it. Sadly, there isn't any windows in the cab, because the cab is filled with like the chassis of the loco. There isn't a motor in there, the motor's actually in the tender, but we'll come back to that, we'll talk about that more later. There's also what look like brass handrails as well down the side, which of course, British models, we have lots of those on. And you've also got, underneath the sort of dome, you've also got some metal rods which go right the way down past the wheels. And that's on both sides, and I won't pretend to know what that's for, but yeah, it is brass by the looks of it. It could be something to do with the brakes, I suppose. I'm not sure entirely. I can't think of what else it could be, so I'll have a stab at that. You know, I'll guess brakes of some description, and I suppose if any of you do know, you can tell me. Now the tender on this piece is very interesting, because in it you can probably tell that it does not look like coal, and instead you have, well, what appears to be logs of some description. So yes, a log-fired locomotive, which is quite interesting. I don't know if it was intended to look like logs, but to me they do look like logs. So yep, maybe that was the thing in the old west, as it was, to run the locomotives on wood, which is you know, which is cool, which is fair enough. There's a lot of moulded detail on the tender, to go into that as well. You've got the Jupiter and the CPRR at the top there, which is all in perfect condition. And you may not be able to tell, but there's a lot of rivets just there, and you know I love my rivets, that just to me makes it look an awful lot more realistic. And also on the loco, you've got a lot of decorative elements, which we don't tend to see, particularly on the British steamers. I'm not saying there's none, but on this loco it seems to be a lot more flamboyant. As you can see, there's that very decorative little pattern in between the two driving wheels on both sides, And of course, you know, the bell and the domes and the chimney, all, and the lamp as well, I suppose, all looks very decorative and flamboyant. It almost makes it look like a toy, you know. It's very almost Christmassy, isn't it? But I'm not calling it a toy, don't worry. But yeah, it just makes it look, you know, I suppose a little bit more mystical, a little bit more magical even, some might say. But yeah, it's a gorgeous loco. The livery is absolutely beautiful as well. You've got quite a lot going on there, of course, mainly reds and silver, but it's also finished with bits of gold here and there. You know, the cylinders and most of the text is also in that gold. But quite noticeably for me, being used to larger locos and more specifically double O gauge locos, the little tiny wheels on the tender and on the front bogie are incredibly tiny, and yet they do pick up. The front bogie on the loco there takes, I think, well, the positive or the negative, one of the terminals for the lamp on the front. And the tender, it's either the left or right side, the side that doesn't have the traction tyre on the loco, which picks up the other terminal for the motor. So it's quite a handy little loco with plenty of pickups here and there. So really it's quite smooth, and you don't see very much stuttering at all. And yeah, I really am in love with this one, and I think I might have to start collecting a couple myself. And before I forget, the tender also features a little tiny wheel, which I assume is probably for the brakes or something of that description, or it could be for water flow or anything like that. But I quite like that. It's a little extra detail, and it helps to divert the attention from the shaft and the wire which bridge between the loco and tender. But yeah, let's get this onto the tracks now and let's get her running. Well, she's sitting up on the tracks anyway, and I've got a big set of, well, not a big set, but I suppose it's quite big for her, a big set of tanks waiting in a siding this time, which she'll go and pick up. Obviously, they aren't the suitable rolling stock for her, but, you know, it shouldn't be too bad. It'll just prove that she can pull some stuff. But before we get on to that, something very interesting on the technical side of this loco. Now, I've already mentioned slightly about the pickups and things like that, but the drive mechanism on this for me is very interesting. Now, for those who've got lots of locos like this, you probably won't find it very interesting, but for me, you know, someone who's just had the traditional Hornby, Bachmann locos, that sort of thing, this is cool because the question arises, is this loco tender driven or engine driven? Because the motor is in the tender, but there is a drive shaft between the two, which I mentioned earlier, which drives the wheels of the loco. So I would argue that, you know, it's loco driven. But yeah, it's a very interesting way to get around that. Obviously you've got a lot of wasted space in the tender, so why not put the motor in there? And you can see the drive shaft just there, which bridges between the two. Well, I'm going to give her a try now. We'll see what this Airfix motor is capable of. We'll just rock her backwards and forwards to begin with, and then I'll reverse her all the way back towards her siding, where she can pick up the tankers and then pull those round, if she will. Let's see. Now, I reckon the lamp in this loco must be a reasonably low voltage one, because it comes on at very, very low power. Unless it is an LED, which I suppose it could be, but I don't think it is. Yeah, it's quite cool, that is. So yeah, you can see she runs reasonably nicely at slow speeds there. We'll now back her all the way up and pick up her freight. Apologies for the rough coupling there. She struggles a bit on these points because there's so many of them just there, so I thought I'd go a bit quick. But yes, no damage done though. It looks all like it's still on the tracks, which is good by me. Let's get her going. Oops. I suppose she's dwarfed a bit by these tankers, but never mind. At least it shows she's a strong girl. Come on, you can do it. Oh, she didn't like that hill, but she'll do it. I'll speed her up after this. But yeah, that's pretty smooth though, pretty smooth. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a second loco out. I don't think I've ever showed this one before. It's a little at&sf 040, which I hope you'll like, and we'll try and get her out. So, yep, she's back here, and I'll make sure this point is open, and yeah, let's get her out. Well, that's it everybody, thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you'd like all the latest, please go and check out the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/samstrains, and give it a like, and you can see all kinds of pictures and things on there, which is cool. But other than that, I think that's about it. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it once again, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers, everybody.